All of you scan this QR code for that email. Let's start the session. We are just going to discuss the Visual Basic data types, modules, and operators. What are different modules we are having? What are the different operators? And what are the different data types that are supported by the Visual Basics? So, Visual Basics uses building block, basic building blocks such as, so if you, like any other programming language. Okay, so we can say the Visual Basics is also is made of a building block. Such as variables, different types of variables, data types, okay, procedure and control structure in its programming. One of the main features of this Visual Basics programming language, the support is called modules. Now, modules we can define as the code in Visual Basics is stored in the form of modules. So, whatever code or the program the user is going to write, okay, basically you can say that is supported, or we can say that is basically stored in the form of modules. And there is three different kinds of modules. Okay, basically because there are three different kinds of modules are there, which is called your form module, standard modules, and class modules. Okay, these are three different kinds of modules that we are going to discuss in case of Visual Basics module. The first one, just remember the name. One is called your form module. Okay, so in this particular called design code, that is basically relevant to the designing resource are stored in a form module. Second is your standard module. So in case of standard module, basically we will go to perform all the standard operations. Okay, and class module where we define the different classes, all the different classes for them. Now form module is simple. Now we can say how what is the form module can be defined. Now this form module can simply define as a simple application, or we can say many contain single forms and the code reside inside that form. Then standard module as the application grows. So as we add more and more form to our particular application, then the application starts growing. And the additional forms are added. Okay, when additional forms are added, and that there may be a common code to be executed several times to avoid the duplication of the code. A separate module containing a procedure is created that implement a common code and called standard. So basically, what happens in standard module. So as we are going to add more and more forms, okay. Now, what we do this? It will causes the application to grow more and more. Once it is grow more and more, so some of the applications may share a common forms or set of common data. So instead of sharing this data with all of us, we will store in a particular location of the module called standard modules, where other forms can be easily utilized, so that the duplication of the data can be optimized, or we can say duplication of the data can be minimized. Then next is your class module. So we can say the class module are the foundation of the object-oriented program, or we can say object-oriented programming in a Visual Basics. Now this is basic fundamental things we can say, where we are supporting the Visual Basics concept programming language, where the principle is supported the object-oriented programming language. Okay. And the new object can be created by writing the code in a class module. So whatever the code when the user wants to write, so in a class module, so it will be generate a new class module. Now each of the modules may contain two things, because so many things are there. Basically, we will go forward. So there are two important things are there. Okay. The first one is your declaration. Okay. So it may include your constant type, a constant, whatever type, and what are the variables that we are using, and what are the DLL, dynamic linking library procedures are declared in it. Second one is a procedure. Now, procedure is nothing but a sub-functions or a property procedure that contains a piece of code that can be executed as a unit. Now, procedure we can say is a sub-function or part of that module, or it can be a piece of code, okay, a separate piece of code, that can be executed as a single unit. And apart from that, there are rules for the certain rules that every programming language follows. So whenever they basically declare any variables, similarly when we're going to declare any variables in your Visual Basics, okay. So here also we have to follow certain rules. So the rules are very simple. The name must be begun with the letters. Now if you can read, so just go through this slide. So these are some rules are given. I have highlighted which can be used for naming the variables. Just go through it. These are some rules that we have to follow. Okay, while naming the variables. So discuss the data type here. So these are the data type that are supported by the Visual Basics. Okay, like any other programming language, Visual Basic also support some of the important data type. So the first category is your called numeric data type. Okay, numeric data type. You can see here, this is your numeric data type. First is your numeric data type. And numeric data type, first we will discuss about the byte data type. Okay, basically store integer values. Okay, this byte data was used to store the integer values in the range of 0 to 255. What is the range of 0 to 255 means? Now this, as I said, this is a byte data type. Okay, this is a byte data type. Okay, I have taken this is a byte data type. Now, how many bits? How many bits are available? 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 8 bits are available. Okay, 8 bits are available. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now we know that now if it is 8 bits, the maximum number of that can be supported, range can be supported with the 2 to the power of 8 because each of this one can take either the value 0, each of this can take value 0 or 1. Now it is 2 to the power of 8, now it is 2 to the power of 8, maximum value will be what is the range of the data can be stored here? Now the range of this can be the range can be now if you take me from 0 maximum 256, so if you start from 0, that means it will be stored maximum up to 2. Okay, so now this byte data type, okay, this byte data type, this byte data type is basically what? Used for storing the data values, okay, of integer type, storing the data values of integer type on which, okay, so on which they are ranging from 0 to 255. Similarly, the next data type that can be used is called your integer type. Okay, integer type, where it is also used for storing the integer type variables. Okay, it is the integer type variables. So now here the range, now the differ in the range. Okay, now you can say see the range of here. The range is somewhat very much larger. Okay, the range is very much higher here. You can see clearly. Similarly, if sometimes if you want to store the uh, larger integer value, okay, some of higher integer values, then on that case, basically we will go for the long integer. Like if you want to store some registration number or some Aadhaar card number, so where we require more than to 16 to 30 bits data. Now that in case this integer value, normal integer data type is not going to support. So for that cases, we will generally go for this long type integer values, where the range you can see here, the range of long type integer value is very high. Similarly, single data which is used for the storing, which is basically used for store the storing the floating type variables, okay, or floating type values in an integer. So whenever it is required to store the decimal values, okay, whenever required to store the decimal value, you will go for this store this floating type variables. Okay, now range here, let's say the range which range you can go for. Now there is one special type of you can say one special type of data we are using here, which is called your currency. So this is basically supported on user basis. So whenever we require to store, okay, so whenever we require to store some currency values, okay, to store some monetary values, and it basically supports 4 digit to right and right to decimal and for 15 digit left to decimal. Which means I can store 4 digit up to right of this. I can use a 4 digit values, okay, and after decimal it will support up to 15 decimal values. Now double is something same as long, but here we can take for the decimal points, okay, the floating point variables, okay. So just going for the integer if you want to store the floating point variables, okay. So in that case, we will go for this double. Now second type of data that can be used is called string, okay, string data type. Now this is basically we will use so whenever we require to store some alphanumeric values. So whenever we need to store alphanumeric values, okay, with integer as well as the numerical values, so we will go for the string data type. So it is used to store the alphanumeric values, and a variable length string can be stored approximately 4 billion characters. Now imagine how long the string variable can. So it can support up to the 4 billion characters in the region you can store this. Then you have the date data type. So it is basically used to store the date and time. Okay, so whenever we require to store either date or time, so we will go for this date function, and a variable declared as a date type can store both your date and time. So if you want, you can note down this data type. Okay, next is your Boolean type. Okay, basically when we have basically Boolean type support only one bit of data. Okay, so only one bit of data is required. Right. So whenever you want to store either true or false value, so you go for that one. And either store one or zero. So this one is for true and this one zero is for false. So this whenever you want to have true and false or one or zero, so we will go for this Boolean data type, which holds either true and false value, and which are not stored in numeric value, okay, and it cannot be used as such. So either we can do this one, or sometimes any other value apart from one is also become true. Okay, so we can say usually one is for true and 0 for false, and this is not indicated memory value. Remember that one. This stands for true and false. And any non-zero value are also considered as true. Sometimes any non-zero value you are taking, that also be considered as a true and false. Then the variant is very important feature that is supported by the Visual Basics. So what the variant does, it will basically store any data type, okay, any data type, and it is by default a Visual Basic data type. So if you are suppose, for example, suppose I forget, suppose I write x equal to 5. Now what here that I forget to define a data type here. Now in Visual Basics, what will happen if you forget to declare the data type? So it will be not a big problem. So whatever value is assigned here, now you can see clearly here, the integer value is assigned to this variable x. The integer value is assigned to variable x. So what will happen? Now this variable x is treated as an integer type. This is called variable. If by default it will take, okay, the data type of the variable, someone forget, then by default it will take the data type, okay, which will be the assigned value to that particular variable. So whatever value is assigned to that variable, that will be the variable type. And in Visual Basic, if you declare a variable without a data type, the default data type is assigned is the value type. Fine. Now this is very important data type that is supported by your Visual Basic. Okay, the first one is numeric, second one is string, the third one is date, and next is a boolean. Then next is a variant data type. The variant data type is very important where we have twin features. Okay. So as we know, the variables are the memory location which can be used to store the values temporarily, and defining the strategy has to be followed as we have already seen in the previous slide. Okay, so there should be a naming system. Okay, we have a particular naming system, and we have to follow we should be following this naming system. Okay, defining naming system so that we can use. A very important thing is that there are two types of basically the different way of declaring the variable in Visual Basic. So two way we can declare. Okay, two different ways we can declare a variable in our Visual Basics. One is called an explicit declaration, and second one is your using option explicit statement. So these are the two different way of declaration. Now the very first one is your explicit declaration. So in this case, we automatically declare whenever the Visual Basics encounter a new variable. So whenever the Visual Basics encounter a new variable, so it will be automatically going to request that one or declare that one, or it will assign a default variable type and the value. And basically, this type of declaration is easier for the user to have more control over the variables, and it is basically in Visual Basics. So this is advisable. So basically, many of the users will be going to perform this type of declaration strategies. Fine. Now, second thing that you have to remember is the variable that are declared with the dim function. Okay, now we will use the dim statement to the name the variable and its type. So whenever we require to name the variables and its different type, we will go for the dim statement, dim statement. Okay. Now this is syntax here. Now you can see here the syntax is given. Fine. This is syntax for declaring the variables. Now this is your dim statement. And this is next we will have the variable name there. Then it will be as data type. Now this will be this type of data is going to be stored. For example, now this is my keyword. Okay, this is my keyword. Now this is str name is the name. This is string type. This is my data type. This is integer type. Okay, if you want to declare an integer type, you can go for integer. Now, similarly, you can declare the multiple variables. Okay, multiple variables in the single line statement also. Now, for example, you can see here multiple rounds, multiple. So multiple variables are declared. Now this is my variable 1 declared as data type 1. This is variable 2 declared as data type 2. And this is variable 3 as data type 3 declared. This is an example. Password is the first variable. You can say the first variable as in string type. Now the name, the second variable, again is a string type. Then the first name is an integer type. Right? So this is how we have declared the variables. Okay, so in either single line or in a multiple line, right? So let's move on. Now, using second way of declaration, which is using option expective statement. Now, the option expective statement checks the module for the usage of any undeclared variable and reports an error to the user. So, if any of the module is undeclared, okay, so they will say if any of the module is undeclared, now the user can just rectify the error on seeing the error message. So it will basically show you the error message at the same time when we will declare this, when we look for this type of declaration. Now the option explicit statement can be explicitly placed in general declaration sections of each module using the following statement. Now this is the process. Okay, if you want to declare the variable by using the option using statement. Now these are the steps that we have to follow. The very first step is we have to click the option item in a tool menu. So we will have a tool menu. Okay, so where you have to choose the option item. Okay, option item is chosen there. Then we will click the edited tab in the option dialog box. So once we have chosen the option item, now there will be an option dialog box will be appear. Okay. Now this in the option dialog box, now we have to choose the edited tab. Now once we choose the edited tab, we'll check require variable declaration option and then click OK button. So once this process is completed, then we will perform, we will check the required variable declaration. Now we will declare the variable there, okay, or variable option, and we will perform the OK button. Now, very important thing that will be here, what will be the scope of the variable. So, whenever we declare a variable, so whether it is accessible for that particular functions, okay, or procedure, or it can be used by any of the function, which is basically decided by the scope of the variable. So, variable is scope to a procedure level that we can say local level or a module level variable, depending upon how it is declared. Okay, so at the time of declare, so basically we also declare the scope of the variable. Okay, so the scope of the variable, or it is the procedure or object determine which part of the code in our applications are aware of variable existence. So where the variable is actually existing or where it is not existing, we can easily identify. And the variable, you can say variable is declared in the general declaration section of form, and hence it can be available to all the procedure. So in general, if you're declaring a variable in a form, okay, now it will be a general declaration type of variable and it can be used by all the procedures. And if you want a variable to be available to all the procedures, okay, within the same module or to all the procedures in an application, the variable should be declare with the broader scope. Now there you have to go for the broader scope if you want to uh, access the variable either in different modules or in the entire applications. Fine. Now let's understand what you mean by the local declaration or local variables and what you mean by global variables. So local variable is one that is declared inside the procedure. So whatever the variable that we are declaring inside the procedure are called local variables. And this variables is only available to the code uh, inside the procedure and can be declared using the div statement. Now, div is a keyword. Okay, so whenever we have variable, we use a div keyword. Div is a keyword, and uh, so this type of local variables are basically used with the div keyword, and you can say that the availability of the code will be inside the procedure. And the variable that declared with the keyword div exists as long as the procedure begins. So it's very simple. So still how much the variable exists? Still the procedure is exist. Okay, in which the variable is declared. Okay, in which the variable we are declaring till the procedure is existing, the variable will be also exist. For example, if you declare with dim sum equal to integer, so this will be declaring a variable. Okay, declaring a variable of integer type. Okay, and whose can be defined inside a local scope. Now there is second type of variable scope which is called static. Now static variables are not. So this is something which is not reinitialized each time the function is called or procedure is called. Therefore, it is return or preserve the value even the procedure will be end. So this is one of the very special type of the variable whose value is initialized only once. Okay, it will not be initialized every time the function is called. Okay, so what will happen? It will return its value. Okay, value should be returned. It should not be vanished. Okay. Then the static variables are also ideal to making a control alternative variables or invisibles. And the value of the module level and public variables are preserved for the lifetime of the application. So if the variable is defined as a static variable, now it can be preserved for the lifetime for an application. And the value of the local variable can be preserved using the static keyword. Now, if you want to preserve any of the local variables, its value, so that we can use it again and again. So we will go for the static keyword. Now, here is an example you can see where we have declared a int permanent as an integer type, but it is a static type variable, so it will be going to preserve its value for the entire application. And the function running total. Okay, now we are using the function running total, and there is another variable which is called static accumulator, which will be having a static in nature. Now accumulate will be add some of the numbers that we are running. In total running total will be equal to accumulator. Now this will be once the function is started. Now we will end with this function. Okay, starting function. Then we have to end this function with the end function. Fine. So this is something about what we have learned about the static variables. This will be what is the scope of the variables and what are the static variables. So let me share the attendance, those who are not given. So scan this QR code for the attendance, those who are not given. Okay, then let's continue next class.